Tonight, more British nationals are allowed out of Gaza, but there are warnings the process is too slow as 79 Americans get out. It's thought around 200 Britons are trapped in Gaza. One Labour frontbencher says the UK's diplomatic efforts don't appear to be having much sway. The COVID inquiry is told that Matt Hancock himself wanted to decide who should live and die if the NHS was overwhelmed. Rishi Sunak is about to sit down for a cosy live stream chat with tech titan Elon Musk as his AI summit comes to a close. And as Sadiq Khan gets the Guy Fawkes treatment, we'll look at who else has ended up in the line of fire. All that and more with the former Culture Minister Ed Vaizey and the former Downing Street advisor John McTernan, who are here to give their take for the next hour. It's Thursday. I'm Beth Rigby, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Tonight, the families of around 200 Britons trapped in Gaza are hoping that their husband or wife, father or mother, son or daughter will be let through the Rafah crossing and be on their way home. It's been a torturous few weeks for families who have watched the Hamas-Israel war unfold in horror, unable to help their loved ones trapped in Gaza, waiting at the phone for news. Finally, a trickle of foreign nationals are crossing the border, but this brings with it growing frustration for families desperately trying to find out whether their relative is on the list. My sources in Whitehall tell me there will be more Britons crossing in the coming days, but stress that this is a fragile operation. Egypt won't tolerate a surge of thousands descending on the border, while governments must be confident that Hamas won't interfere. Foreign nationals are being let out according to need, not nationality, I'm told, with the wounded let through first. But for those who have been waiting, it's a desperate situation, and questions have been asked tonight about whether Britain is getting its citizens out fast enough. Well, we've been getting political reaction to the evacuation problem today. Let's hear from the Foreign Secretary and the Shadow Chancellor.
The situation is fragile, and we recognise that in order to continue to have British nationals and other foreign nationals leaving Gaza, we will need to maintain this fragile coalition. I've been speaking and conversing with my Egyptian counterpart overnight, including this morning. Lord Ahmed, one of the ministers in my department, is in the region at the moment, speaking directly with people who have influence over this, and through intermediaries, we're trying to influence Hamas. It is difficult. It is fragile, but we will continue working to try and get British nationals to safety.
I'm incredibly concerned about the scenes that I'm seeing from Gaza. It is distressing to see what is unfolding there. It is incredibly important too that there are humanitarian pauses to allow fuel, water, medicine, food into Gaza, but also to give a chance to those people who can leave the country to do so now through the Rafah crossing. And I know that the British government is working with the Egyptians and the Israelis to ensure that people can leave, including British citizens, through the Rafah crossing.
Well, our political correspondent, Amanda Acas, is here. Amanda, the government under growing pressure. What are you hearing tonight?
Well, so far that we know that the latest position is that more British nationals have managed to make it through the Rafah crossing today, on top of those 2 aid workers we found out came through yesterday. But we really don't have much of a sense of how many more. The government say they're not going to give us a running commentary on that because it's such a rapidly changing situation. Now, clearly there's been this massive diplomatic effort going on behind the scenes just to get the Rafah crossing to open at all for any length of time. And the UK government say they'll be continuing to work closely with the Israelis and the Egyptian authorities to keep that going for as long as possible, to support all the other British nationals waiting to try and get out. In terms of the numbers, we think there's around 200 or so nationals as well as their dependents, but altogether it's thought they'll be in the sort of low hundreds still. A list of their names has been passed to the authorities, but as you say, we've been told they're being prioritised according to medical vulnerability. Now, the government has been able to take some more practical steps in terms of sending out consular support to the Rafah crossing to help people when they get through, and they've got another team of Border Force officials in Cairo. They've sent out a team from the Red Cross as well to help people dealing with the psychological impact of what they've been going through. But really the question is, are they doing enough? Rachel Reeves being very diplomatic there, saying they are working hard, but Jess Phillips has been much more critical and outspoken, saying we're not getting people out quickly enough. The government doesn't really seem to be holding much diplomatic sway. She's really been talking about from the perspective of a constituent of hers who has 16 family members trapped there, hasn't heard anything. And of course, Humza Yousaf as well, the First Minister of Scotland, in a similar position. And I think really it gets to the nub of the issue here, because for all the kind of intense diplomatic activity, Prime Minister, Foreign Secretary flying around the Middle East, having all these phone calls, actually, as we heard James Cleverly there saying, it's a very fragile situation. And frankly, much of the situation is just out of the government's hands.
Yeah, lots of MPs obviously being asked by their constituents. And as you said, Humza Yousaf's family, despite him dashing off for phone calls today, I was told that they're not coming out tonight. So desperate times for families. Thank you, Amanda. Thanks for the update. Well, now, Rishi Sunak has said the UK's landmark AI Safety Summit will, in his words, tip the balance in favour of humanity after tech companies agree to work with governments to test the safety of models before their release. The PM said at the event at Bletchley Park that it was only the beginning of the conversation, but that it showed there was the political will and capability to control the technology. Here's our science and technology editor, Tom Clark.
There were certainly spare seats for political leaders at the PM's AI summit, but he did attract all the big names in AI development. And in closing the summit, claimed a breakthrough.
Like-minded governments and AI companies have today reached a landmark agreement. We will work together on testing the safety of new AI models before they are released.
AI safety testing is all about checking the behaviour of enormous computer models that power tools like chatbots. Compared to the wartime computers designed by AI pioneer Alan Turing in this office at Bletchley Park, their scale's mind-boggling. The volumes of data he was dealing with throughout the whole of wartime added up to gigabytes of information. The amount used to train the latest frontier AIs is measured in petabytes, 1 million times more. A challenge of scale that even a genius like Turing would probably struggle to get his head around. Sam Altman of OpenAI, which created ChatGPT, told us earlier in the day governments already had access to test models.
Mr. Altman, can I just ask you a quick question? No. How open are you to maybe giving access to your models?
We do. They do? Well, most AI firms have allowed outside testing of models, but not permission to rummage inside them to see how they work.
Can you give us an example, a concrete example of how you're going to get better or deeper access to some of these models to reassure people that they will be safer?
People have called for it, and when I was speaking to many of you last week, indeed it was raised then. I think it may well have been raised by you, Tom, but I'm pleased to say we've delivered on that. We haven't got time to go into all the different things that it will do now, but in broad senses, look, our job in government is to have the expertise to go and test things before our citizens are exposed to them to make sure that they're safe.
So we don't have the details, the commitments are voluntary, but according to AI developers, it's not in their interest to make products that aren't safe.
I think we have a lot of lessons to learn from the social media age of the last 10 years. And this time around, I think we can all be a little bit more proactive and a bit more sensitive to the risks. And I think that's the right way forward.
Mr. Sunak's now off to talk to Elon Musk on his platform X. The promo looks like a tech takeover of Number 10. Is the PM really interested in Mr. Musk's views on killer robots, or whether the world's richest man might invest in the UK? Tom Clark, Sky News, Bletchley Park.
Well, as Tom Clark was just saying, all eyes this evening are on the meeting between the Prime Minister and Elon Musk. Our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, joins us from Whitehall. Now, Sam, you're about to dash in and grab your seat in the audience for this so-called interview tonight. What are you expecting?
Well, Beth, I'm standing just outside Lancaster House, the Foreign Secretary's residence, just around the corner from Buckingham Palace. And, you know, make no mistake, this is the conclusion of the AI summit. Rishi Sunak is about to meet Elon Musk. It's a big tech event, but really, tonight's event is actually all about power. I can tell you from multiple conversations with people in Downing Street, they are really pleased that he has turned up in person for this event. One top Tory told me that he was the biggest possible name that you could get at this event. But what exactly does he represent? Yes, he's a businessman. He is somebody who owns a social media platform. He runs a car company. He sends people into space. And he wouldn't define himself as a politician. But look at the influence he's starting to have, the decisions he can make that make more of an imprint than perhaps even traditional leaders of countries. He has views about what's going on in Gaza. He, with his Starlink system, can restore internet and phone connectivity to Gaza after Israel turns it off. He has views about what's going on in Ukraine and the war with Russia, and again, the ability to help or hinder some of the efforts over there. He has views about migration, particularly in America on the southern border. He was expressing that on social media today. So what I'm really looking for at this event is, what is his relationship with Rishi Sunak? Do they listen to each other as equals? Does one look like the bigger political figure than the other? Now, a few weeks ago, a leader from a big international tech firm turned to a British official and said, I see you as time zones, not countries. The question is that the impression that Elon Musk leaves Rishi Sunak with tonight?
Sam there with all the latest, and we'll be coming back to that conversation between Elon Musk and the Prime Minister a bit later. But for now, let's return to the evacuation of UK nationals from Gaza. Joining me now is Philip Rycroft, the former senior civil servant who served in a number of roles, including the permanent secretary at the Department for Exiting the EU. Philip, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time. Now, if I may, let's start off with Gaza. The government are under pressure over trapped Britons in Gaza and getting them out. Jess Phillips said Britons were not getting out quickly enough and said the UK's diplomatic approach was not having much sway. Do you think she's right?
I've absolutely no doubt that the FCDO, the Foreign Office, will be doing its utmost to get UK citizens outside of Gaza. But as the Foreign Secretary said, this is a hugely complicated situation, a very delicate situation, and there are a lot of other countries negotiating to get their citizens out as well. So the effort will be being put in. Whether the results are achieved really is dependent on that very complex set of relationships with the Israelis, the Egyptians, and indeed the actions of Hamas in Gaza itself. But I don't think this will be down to lack of effort. It is down to the complexities of an extraordinarily difficult situation in that part of the world.
Is it also, Philip, partly down to just pecking order in the sense that the US probably has more sway because of its relations in the region than the UK?
Yeah, of course. The US will have, in a situation like this, folk will be listening to the US, and countries like the UK and indeed other European countries will be down that pecking order. The UK does have the advantage of well-established diplomatic networks, people who understand how to make things happen or how to try to make things happen. So it does have some advantages over other smaller countries. But even so, in this situation, it'll not be the UK that's top of most people's minds in Israel and Egypt as they think about how to manage that crossing.
Yeah, a very tough wait for the families who must be desperate for news. But more broadly, how do you see the situation developing? Does the longer the Israel-Hamas war go on, does it make it more difficult for the West to maintain its position that Israel has the right to defend itself?
Who knows is the honest answer to that. And this is a situation that took everybody, by the looks of it, by surprise. There have been, clearly very, very difficult debates about how the West and other countries should respond to this. But what's going on at the moment is very much in the hands of the Israelis. They clearly have the initiative now. Their military machine is taking the action that they think is fit and proper in response to the incursion into their territory and the terrible, terrible tragedy that ensued from that. Frankly, for a lot of countries, including the UK, will be watching to see what happens, will not have a huge amount of influence over that. But ultimately, everybody will wish to see the minimization of the further loss of life in this. And ultimately, we have to find out a way that resolves this conflict. For whatever the military solution will not be the end of this. That ultimately this will only end when there is a way for these people to live peacefully side by side.
Ultimately, a political solution then required. Philip, can I bring you on to artificial intelligence and Elon Musk? Because the Prime Minister's preparing to sit down for a cosy chat with Elon Musk. Now, if you were in an advisory role and you've got lots of experience about giving advice to ministers and very senior ministers, it seems to me that the Prime Minister is meant to be the statesman who answers the questions, not asks them. Is there a danger that in doing this he looks like a junior partner?
Well, it's not the first time that very senior politicians have courted big tech giants. And it used to be Bill Gates that prime ministers were very keen to get into number 10. And Elon Musk has huge influence, clearly, not least as a big investor. And who wouldn't like some of that investment coming into the UK, not least in the car industry. But politicians do have to be a little bit careful in this space. Nobody's elected Elon Musk. His opinions are those of a businessman. He's not a statesman. And so, in my view, the politicians shouldn't look like demandeurs in terms of thinking about how businesses relate to regulation, to the business of government. Clearly, they can court business people for their investment, but they shouldn't look as though they're kowtowing to them in terms of their regulatory context. They should listen to their views, but it should be democratically elected politicians that take those really, really important decisions. And let's hope that's the case in the UK.
And just finally, talking about ministerial decision-making, there's been lots of talk about Whitehall this week and the importance of learning lessons. I'm referring, of course, to the COVID inquiry, the chaos in government criticism too, not just of politicians, but of civil servants as well. This has been humbling for Sir Humphrey, hasn't it?
Yes, there are aspects of this story that are not comfortable reading for civil servants present and past like myself. The planning for COVID was clearly found wanting. The speed of reaction, how Whitehall copes with this, was put under serious pressure by what was an unprecedented crisis. Some things went well. Let's not forget the furlough scheme, the handling of the benefit system, ultimately the rollout of the vaccine programme as well. But there is no doubt that those of us who were in the system wanted more reform of Whitehall, who still want more reform of Whitehall. That reform had not gone far enough, and Whitehall was tested very, very severely by this crisis in terms of its professionalism, its understanding of the issues, its grip of data and so on. So some of those criticisms absolutely justified. By the same token, what all of this shines a light on is dysfunction at the very top of government, dysfunction in the political system, and does say something quite worrying about the structure of governance in the United Kingdom. And let's hope the inquiry gets into some of that as well, because out of this, we should be thinking very hard about how decisions are made, about where the checks and balances are in the system, and how the Prime Minister in particular relates to politicians more broadly across the system, to devolved administrations, to metro mayors and local government and all the rest of it. There are a lot of really, really important lessons that should emerge from this inquiry.
And Philip, sorry, but just quick thought, because I'm out of time, but just finally, do you recognise what you heard when people talked of a toxic culture, an orgy of narcissism in Boris Johnson's number 10?
What we've seen, I wasn't there, but what we've seen corroborates that. We've seen the WhatsApp messages, we've heard a lot of testimony. What I can say is government does not need to be like that. I worked very closely with number 10 through the coalition years and through Brexit. Really tough times, not as tough as COVID, but very tough times. And in those days, I was dealing with special advisors and politicians who pretty much universally maintained the basic civilities of life. We could have big rows, big arguments, there were some tantrums, but by and large, people remained respectful and civil. And in any walk of life, that is hugely important. So some of the stuff that we're hearing now, frankly, were absolutely unacceptable in any line of business.
OK, Philip, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time. Well, coming up next on the Politics Hub, is Rishi Sunak's meeting with Elon Musk a good idea? We'll get the thoughts of our panel, Ed Vaizey and John McTernan.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent.
Welcome back. Now, before the break, we were hearing about Rishi Sunak's meeting with Elon Musk. Let's get the thoughts of our panel, Ed Vaizey and John McTernan. Now, let's start with you, Ed. Sam there was saying that Downing Street were pleased about this because he's the biggest possible name. Do you think it's a coup?
No, I think it's pathetic. I mean, why have this gimmick of having Elon Musk, who's, already halved the value of Twitter and destroyed it, and then I gather the Prime Minister is going to be interviewing Elon Musk. I mean, the Prime Minister's playing the mini-me to Elon Musk. Much better. They've achieved a huge amount at this AI safety summit. Why have they handed over all the glory to Elon Musk?
I don't know how to respond to that. That was
Really?
very forthright.
Well, we rehearsed all this before, Beth. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with you.
What do you think, John? Is he a mini-me to Elon Musk? I mean, seriously, for a Prime Minister to interview someone, it's a bit weird, isn't it?
It's totally odd.
It is really weird. Tony would never have done that.
Yeah.
Tony Blair would never have done that. And I think it's appropriate to have Elon Musk. He's done to the value of Twitter what Truss and Kwarteng did to the British economy, tanked it. And I think there's something really strange for Rishi Sunak to be a mini-me, to trying to get the glory from somebody else. But this is a guy with a controversial reputation who's allowed far-right voices back onto Twitter, which is the opposite of good regulation. It's a kind of anti-regulation that Elon Musk represents.
Ed, how could he make it a success, though? Because, I mean, this was a question I was thinking about yesterday. If you were a Prime Minister and this guy is regulating a platform which the EU Commissioner was criticising him for some of the material that was coming out in the aftermath of the outbreak of the Israel-Hamas war, does the Prime Minister have to kind of smash him up a bit, hold him to account?
Well, we're going to see, aren't we, when this gets released on the X platform. Apparently, they're going to be broadcasting this amazing interview by the Prime Minister. But, it's really important, I think, to make the point that the AI Safety Summit, I think, has been a very big success. They did get all the kind of major players in AI to this conference. They got China came along with the Vice Premier. So big countries, important. I know that's controversial to have China. They issued their declaration. They've got future AI summits in France and South Korea. There's real momentum. They've kind of forced the White House into announcing their own AI safety institute. They've had the Vice President of the US over. So why end it all with this slightly gimmicky interview with a controversial guy? I'm not saying, obviously, that Elon Musk is without achievement. He's one of the world's richest men. Starlink, Tesla, PayPal back in the day, and SpaceX, all great achievements. But why do down Britain by interviewing a tech bro?
Is he thinking about life after Downing Street here?
Well, I'm sure there are lots of Downing Street staffers handing out CVs.
I think
as Musk walks down the corridor.
I think it's a real issue for Rishi, because one of his downsides is for the voter. He does look like a tech bro. So a tech bro with a tech bro isn't really projecting something. And at this stage in the electoral cycle, if you're a Prime Minister, it's likely you're going to lose. But if you're going to win or lose, you should be doing things of substance. And the substance is, Ed was right, the substance is, what were the agreements? Who came?
Exactly.
What's the next progress after this? And I think bringing China is really right, because China are regulating their AI. We can't have four competing different sets of AI regulation. But the substance should speak for itself. And it goes to a fear I think the number 10 have, that the substance doesn't speak for what the Prime Minister wants. And appearing with Elon Musk is a risk, because it ties you to a man who may say something controversial tomorrow or the day after. And also, as you made a good point, which is, if Elon was coming to be on your show tonight, you'd be asking him the hard questions about what he put on his platform. If the Prime Minister doesn't ask any of those questions, he'll look weak. But if he does, he'll look rude.
Or it could create a volatile situation.
Very odd, yeah.
I have to say, though, they're filming it, they're not live streaming it, so it's going to be filmed and then put out.
Yes, but it is going to be broadcast
as live.
Isn't it? It's not being given, it's not being pooled.
It is,
the
and also there's
there's
an audience. Our Sam Cates is in there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So you both think it's a terrible idea.
A terrible idea. I couldn't believe it when the first stuff came up on Twitter about it.
Well, look, let's move on to the other thing we've been discussing tonight, the situation in Gaza. And my question for both of you, and let's start with you, John, is what I asked Philip there, which is, the longer that this goes on, the more casualties that we see in Gaza. Does it get more difficult for the Allies to hold the line that Israel has a right to defend itself, i.e. will the pressure grow for a more permanent ceasefire?
Well, the thing is, in international law, every nation has a fundamental right, a foundational right to self-defence. And the way the Israelis conduct their self-defence, they have lawyers embedded in the IDF who make a decision on every single target. So they have to conduct their self-defence in the way that they find legally appropriate. There will be pressure for people who want to see ceasefire. I don't think a ceasefire is appropriate for many, many reasons, because you need two sides, really, fundamentally, to have a ceasefire. Hamas have to want one too. So you have to find a way to get the humanitarian aid in and find a way to get the hostages out, because they're still there, and also the British citizens out as fast as we can.
Ed?
I mean, I think everyone will get mission fatigue, just as people get mission fatigue over Ukraine. But I think what people in this country have to realise, and in the West have to realise, is that both these conflicts are our fight. People worry about the outbreak of World War III. I would argue, to a certain extent, we are seeing this kind of conflict starting between the West and the forces of autocracy. And if we don't stand by Israel in taking on these terrorists who want to destroy Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, we will be weakening ourselves. There's a massive amount of self-interest here, leaving aside the moral case, which I think is unarguable, about Israel's right to defend itself. So it is inevitable that there will be fatigue, but we must, I hope, stand firm.
OK, well, thank you both. Don't go anywhere because we've got lots more to talk about. Coming up next on the Politics Hub, another extraordinary day at the COVID inquiry, where we heard that the former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, thought life and death decisions should be made by him rather than medics. Welcome back. You're watching the Politics Hub. It's been a week of explosive revelations at the COVID inquiry. And today it was the turn of the former chief executive of NHS England, Lord Stevens, who told the inquiry that former Health Secretary Matt Hancock thought that if the NHS was overwhelmed, life and death decisions should be made by him and not medics. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi was there and sent this report.
As the Health Secretary leading the country through a pandemic, Matt Hancock became one of our most important decision takers.
We start with around 5,000 ventilators. We think we need many times more than that.
Now, it's emerged that he believed the final decision on rationing critical care should rest with him and not senior doctors. Lord Stevens, the former chief executive of the NHS, told the COVID inquiry in a written submission that the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care took the position that in this situation he, rather than say the medical profession or the public, should ultimately decide who should live and who should die. Unfortunately, this horrible dilemma never crystallised.
Did you have a view as to whether that was an appropriate line for him to take?
I certainly wanted to discourage the idea that an individual Secretary of State, other than in the most exceptional circumstances, should be deciding how care would be provided.
Very nice to meet you. I'm Matt. Matt Hancock's position became known after a planning exercise exploring worst-case scenarios for the NHS. But when his predecessor, Jeremy Hunt, was put in a similar position in 2016 during a flu simulation exercise, Mr. Hunt said, "I cannot play God, and these are decisions best left to medical professionals." Matt Hancock was forced to resign after breaking lockdown rules while having an affair. He said at the same time, "We didn't get every decision right." This inquiry will find out exactly which ones he did and which ones he didn't. Ashish Joshi, Sky News, at the COVID inquiry.
Ashish Joshi there with a report on the COVID inquiry. Let's come to you first, John. Were you surprised about Matt Hancock's approach, that he thought he should be the decision maker rather than the medics?
I was utterly astounded, to be honest. It goes beyond anything. Politicians have a strong sense of self, which can look like arrogance. Sometimes they have to have self-confidence. But the idea that you should actually have a list of patients, a list of conditions, and say, you live and you die, I can't imagine wanting that power, let alone exercising it. It's a medical decision, it's a clinical decision. We have the NHS at arm's length from politicians for that very reason. And the fact that's kind of, it just adds colours in our picture of the chaos at the heart of number 10, the dysfunction, political.
And Ed, you were in government. You must have worked with Matt. Didn't you?
Yes,
Work with
unfortunately,
Matt?
I did work with Matt. I mean, Matt's a friend, but he's a nightmare to work with if you're a politician, if you're trying to work with him in a collegiate fashion, because it's all about accruing power for Matt Hancock. But so it doesn't surprise me, as it were, that he made that statement. So, I mean, I think, he's done I'm a Celebrity and he's done SAS Who Dares Wins. Apparently they're going to turn Squid Games into a proper game show, so maybe Matt is rehearsed for that. But I do, to defend Matt Hancock, which is not my natural inclination, I think Simon Stevens is being a bit disingenuous, because if you're saying, the NHS is overwhelmed with COVID patients who are dying, we have to take some tough decisions as medical directors. And this could mean, when you talk about live or die, whether you kind of stop cancer screening. And we know that lots of people with heart conditions and cancer were affected by COVID in any event. Then I think you would say, if you were Simon Stevens or anyone else, I want political backing for these very, very tough decisions. And I think Matt Hancock's phrase could equally be interpreted as saying, ultimately, if you're going to make a big call like this, it's got to be ultimately a political call.
Let me ask you more broadly before I come back to John, just in terms of what else we heard about the orgy of narcissism. That was the Prime Minister, then Boris Johnson's words, of the orgy of narcissism within number 10, the toxic macho culture, the violent misogynistic language. I mean, when you sit there, you served in government, when you sit there and you listen to all of this, what do you make of it? Is it familiar? Are you shocked? Do you think?
Well, I'm the butterfly. I'm the butterfly.
See all that?
I'm the butterfly in the jungle that unleashed chaos, because I can still remember telling Michael Gove in about 2008-9, Dominic Cummings is kicking about, why don't you hire him as your advisor? And look what happened down the chain. First of all, Brexit, and then all this nonsense in Downing Street. I mean, I think the WhatsApps are...
So you didn't think think this was his...
The one disarming thing that Dominic Cummings does is that when he's questioned at the inquiry and told, you couldn't run a whelk stall, he says, yes, that's true. I'm not an executive. I can't run anything. And it sounds like it was utter and complete chaos in Downing Street, not least when you're taking these big decisions which affected everyone in the country. You've got to stick to them. You've got to be really clear.
When the public see this, do you think it is kind of the nail in the coffin for the Conservatives, in that the public would be like, if you ran it that badly and everything else that happened afterwards with Liz Truss and so on and so forth, regardless of what Rishi Sunak does or doesn't achieve,
I think, Rishi Sunak is perfectly entitled to say, I'm the grown-up, and I believe this, by the way, I'm the grown-up who's come in and restored some sanity to British politics, but you can't help being affected by that. To a certain extent, all politicians are affected by this. The public will see just these idiots kind of running around texting each other in these most extreme terms. I think that kind of applies to all politicians.
John, you worked in Downing Street, and there were lots of reports about,
phones being thrown
and things like that. I mean, were you surprised, or is it just sometimes like, I'm not trying to make excuse for it, but I'm trying to understand that you're in a pressure cooker of insane pressure and tension.
I had lunch today with a very, very senior former civil servant who had worked both in Number 10 at the time of Tony and also at the time of David Cameron. And we were comparing notes about what was the culture like, and we both agreed it's impossible that either Cameron or Blair wouldn't have gripped the issue of COVID.
Exactly. Right.
It's impossible to imagine this kind of narcissism, the self-indulgence where the figures, whether advisors or politicians, are more important than getting to the right decision. And we were thinking, what was it that changed? Because I remember when it came out about the parties and the booze case and all these things, I was asked on TV, well, is it pressurised? Do you reach for a drink? And people in Number 10, in my time, you get to work too early, you work too late, you get home, you fall asleep, rinse and repeat. You're thinking about the public service. And my conclusion, and the person I was having lunch with, our conclusion was, in the end, the culture of Number 10 is set at the top. Tony Blair, David Cameron, Theresa May, public service was from the very top. And Boris Johnson, we knew when he became Prime Minister, when he became leader of the Tory party, he was a lord of misrule. He was a joker. And the public figure, the public face, was what set the tone internally. And people, I know Helen McNamara, one of the civil servants I respect the most ever, having worked with her, in that situation, she was talking about it, what kind of culture it made, the inability to actually give advice. And what has gone wrong is that governance is so distorted by some personalities that even though a lot of us, I think, outside, a lot of us looking as commentators, we could tell something was going wrong. Nobody in the nation could stop it. And thank goodness, the TUC came up with the idea of furlough, Treasury agreed it. Thank goodness we had the vaccine, and that was fine. Those are separate almost from the Number 10 operation.
I'm out of time, but I just want a quick thought from both of you on this, because something I've observed is that a lot of the people that were involved in this have now left Downing Street. And so when we talk about lessons learned, you can make lessons in terms of better preparedness, etc. But who carries the can here? Ed, who carries the can for all of this?
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, no one's going to have to resign over this. To a certain extent, people carry the can. We had the Iraq war inquiry, and people kind of have to live with that. And people like Dominic Cummings and Boris Johnson will have to live with the COVID inquiry findings. I don't think it will impact them significantly. Apparently, Dominic Cummings is on the speaking circuit as well, so he's doing all right, and continues to kind of put out these amazing chutzpah tweets about how he was right.
So, but John,
So look, in the end, the way you are in public service should be how you're defined after you leave public service.
Okay.
So I think in this, the fall of the gap between how they performed and the standard they should have reached will dog them, I think, all their lives. And it has to be said that something has to be done to make sure that future Number 10s aren't like this.
OK.
It's
all right, well,
impossible
thank you for that. More to come. We're shredding other parts of the show just because we want more from you two.
Oh, is that right?
I know.
Oh, great.
Oh, we like the
I know,
sound
I
of
can't believe it either, but there we go. Now, the Bank of England has left its key interest rate unchanged at 5.25%. The Monetary Policy Committee has also updated its economic forecast, predicting that the economy will flatline until 2025. The Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey says it's much too early to be thinking about rate cuts. That threatens to put more pressure on the government, which is relying on the economic bounce back to boost its chances of winning the next general election. Here's our economics editor, Ed Conway.
A little piece of Britain's economic story has just come to an end. Natalie Parks's great-grandfather, Edgar, set up this shop a century ago, selling and repairing shoes. But now it's the latest victim of the cost of living crisis.
It's been really, really hard. People's spending habits have changed drastically. The repair side of the business was busy. We were really busy, but it wasn't enough to keep us open, unfortunately. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings, and I promised my dad I'd look after my family when he died, and I just feel like I've let them down.
Imagine thousands of stories like this across the country and you begin to get a sense of how the economy's doing. Soggy, to judge from what the Bank of England is saying, flatlining. But the governor says interest rates are staying where they are.
Policy is restrictive, to use the phrase that we're all using in various ways.
Restrictive meaning it's kind of like
it's having an effect.
It's
biting, if you like, in that sense. That's what we need, and it's too soon to start talking about, when we move away from that. I think we're all saying that in various ways.
It's too soon. When is it time?
Well, our job is to get inflation down to 2%. So I think we've got to be, much more confident that we're headed there than any of us, I think, are currently.
And you're not confident at the moment?
Well, there are risks. There are a lot of risks out there, and we've got to see a lot more progress because, let's face it, inflation is still at 6.7%.
But the bank knows that firm stance is going to make it even more unpopular.
Talk to people here, and they tell you the hard bit wasn't raising interest rates faster than ever before, up to really high levels. The hard bit is keeping them high, higher than anyone really expected, for longer than they expect, even as households and businesses around the country are suffering.
For Natalie, the final straw came when her husband lost his job of 22 years after window and door firm SafeStyle went into administration.
He was just distraught. He'd received a text message from SafeStyle to tell him that they were to down tools and they no longer needed him. They were being made redundant, so, yeah.
So it goes in today's economy. Individual tales of financial pain adding up to a bigger story. We're all hoping for a happy ending, but, says the bank, it might not come for quite a while. Ed Conway, Sky News.
Ed Conway there, a happy ending. John, let's come to you. For Rishi Sunak, 3 of his 5 promises to the public are all hooked on economy, halving inflation, growing the economy and, of course, cutting debt. Is he going to have a happy ending by the time there's a general election?
I really doubt it, because the Clinton campaign, the President Clinton's campaign, it's the economy stupid. And what's the economy come down to? It's how families feel, how individuals feel. If inflation's halved, are they going to feel better off? Well, not if they've come off a fixed-rate mortgage onto a much higher rate mortgage. Not if their small business can't actually manage its cash flow because of the increased interest they have to pay to the bank. And I think it's the real economy out there. People are hurting. We saw the woman whose husband lost his job. And I think it's the real economy and the real feelings that real people have. That's going to be the issue for Rishi. And I think he'll have a happy ending for himself. He's got a job to have after this, I'm sure. But people are now worried about their prospects and their children's prospects.
But Ed, I mean, for him to have any chance winning a general election, I mean, firstly, do you think he has any chance?
I think there's a chance of a hung parliament.
OK.
Of stopping Labour getting a majority. I think things are pretty bad, and it's not Rishi Sunak's fault. You've had Liz Truss and Boris Johnson before that, and you've had Brexit and the Tory civil wars, but I won't go down that. I think, if anyone's going to try and help the economy, it's going to be Rishi Sunak. I think, funny enough, Jeremy Hunt is also doing a very good job as Chancellor. I like his kind of positioning as being kind of boring and cautious. What is not helping are kind of lunatic Tory backbenchers banging on about tax cuts. I mean, it's completely insane, this call for tax cuts. But I think what the other problem the government has is there are lots of things, even if Labour win the next election, there are lots of things beyond their control. The war in Ukraine and the impact on energy prices, geopolitical instability. The Middle East is going to affect oil prices as well. There are lots of factors. But the key issue is you shouldn't take your eye off a prize of productivity. And there's a bit of Liz Truss, which is right here, because the American economy is just powering... Right. No, because Liz Truss, the one thing she got right, which she said we need to focus relentlessly on productivity. The American economy is somehow powering on, and lots of people are asking questions. Why is the American economy
because the scale of investment, the scale of investment in the
those are the kind of questions people will be asking.
But just quickly on, you talked about Jeremy Hunt. There is talk that Rishi Sunak might move Jeremy Hunt.
Yeah, I thought that was completely bizarre. Where did all that come? I mean, you would probably know better than I do where all that comes from. I think Jeremy Hunt is the right. I think they are quite a good team. They're not exciting,
but I think
they are steady.
When you get those kinds of speculations coming out, we know where they come from, and it shows you a team that is not united. It's a team that's fractional and factional all the way down. And the problem is, if you want to find a narrow path to victory, you have to have absolute unity. Unity of purpose, unity of voice, unity of policy. That's not there. The voices off are terrible, but the voices inside number 10, the voices in the cabinet are at each other. And I think if you
But
said,
it's so weird that why would you want to get rid of Jeremy Hunt?
I've no idea, but you said a hung parliament. The problem with the hung parliament is the Tories have nobody to vote with them. So that Labour boss that unless the SNP will vote with the Tories.
And then it'll be, you know, an election in May 25.
Exactly.
Right, OK. I've got to stop because we've got to do.
We've got a show to do.
We've got more
we are
stuff
the
to do.
show.
I'm sorry for this rowdy panel tonight. Sorry about this. Coming up next on the Politics Hub, who is the latest public figure to earn the wrath of a Kent village for Bonfire night? We'll reveal all after the break.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over. Christchurch has been changed forever by what happened here.
There was a river of blood coming out of the mosque. That's a scene that you don't forget.
Ida has certainly left its mark on New Orleans.
It just feels heartbreaking.
We help you understand the world with us. We are standing on the supply line right into the heart of America's opioid crisis. I've reported from around the world and around the UK. Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who've made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Joe Biden knows the celebrations are over, and this is a country in crisis.
You don't want to be remembered this way. You always want to be remembered as something positive.
It is almost impossible to predict where these fires will go next. This gives you an idea of the strength of those winds, strong enough to bend and twist metal.
Do you regret the tweet, Gary?
There's no sign, publicly at least, of either side being willing to give ground. How do you reassure the public that all of these mistakes wouldn't be made again? I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
Welcome back to the Politics Hub. Well, it's Bonfire night this weekend, a commemoration charged with history and politics. And there is one town in Kent that has for decades now tried to keep that spirit alive by choosing a public figure as the fall guy, literally. This year, they've picked London Mayor Sadiq Khan because of his ULEZ policy, but there have been quite a few other politicians over the years who've crashed and burned. That was superb, wasn't it? Now, the obvious questions coming up. John, who would be on your bonfire?
Until he's out of public life, it would be Donald Trump.
Donald Trump?
Every year until until he retires from public life and doesn't run for president again.
OK.
Any Brexiteer calling for tax cuts?
Come on, give me some names.
Dominic Cummings, put him up there.
Dominic Cummings?
He's in the news, put him up there.
My cousin actually does this annually as well, and he puts a politician on.
OK.
Of all different, across the political spectrum. Everyone's been on there every year.
Well, he does it...
I don't know who he's doing this
for his
weekend.
village?
Yeah, well, no, for his... Yeah, he does a big party. It's fun.
And where is it?
It's up in Milton Keynes. Actually, it's in Mid-Beds, actually.
Oh, in
Dean Dorries.
Oh, yes.
I don't know who's on... I don't know.
He'll probably make it this year, won't
anyway, but what are you two going to do for Bonfire night, then?
So... I never celebrate Bonfire Night because I was brought up by my granny, a good Catholic, to understand it as an anti-Catholic festival, and so we don't do it.
OK.
That's very good. We'll be going round to a mate's for fireworks and all that sort of stuff.
I don't hate...
West London Bonfire.
Do you remember Tony and Sherry being put on the fire, though?
No, I see they're both featured in that
different
whole...
years, though.
Yeah, they must have each owned different years. But, look, I think politicians who get annoyed being made fun of probably shouldn't be in politics. You need to have a sense of humour. I know we talked about some of the arrogance, narcissism, but you can always say, at least it's me being burnt, and not my
But it is always politicians, isn't it? I mean, it could be Elon Musk, for example. I mean, they never pick business people. I mean, Elon Musk has destroyed Twitter/X. Maybe
could have been Gerald Ratner one year.
Gerald Ratner could have been one.
Are you putting him on your bonfire as well?
I would have him as a potential candidate. I mean, I think I'm getting to the stage where I've got a short list now. I can't really decide. I mean, I obviously knew when you were doing the VT that you were going to ask me, and I couldn't think of the particular Brexiteer I'd most like to nominate to go on the old bonfire.
Does Sadiq deserve to go on?
No, well, I'm quite a fan of you, Les. That's my embarrassing secret. I think it's a good thing. I think clean air in London is an important...
Yeah, it's a great achievement.
So that's
great Tory policy.
Well, it's unfair in one sense, but it also means he's become a national politician in a sense. And all mayors want to be national politicians, and one of the prices of it is then people can make you the guy. It's best to be always in politics. It's better to be known than not known.
So I've got to wrap in a sec, but I'm going to press you on your Brexiteer. Come on. You've got to give me a name now.
Well, it just seems so unfair to pick one out because they've all got their own sort of, qualities and good qualities.
All right, well, just...
Maybe I should... I mean, Michael Gove is my closest friend in politics, so... he drives me up the wall with his kind of loony Brexit
So you're going to put Michael
He's
on?
just done this loony right-wing conference. What was it called?
So you're putting Michael on?
So Michael would understand if I put him on the bonfire.
I'm going to have to wrap now. So you've put Michael Gove on?
Yeah, but in a spirit of great friendship.
In a spirit
of great friendship.
Well, look, thank you both. We'll continue this afterwards.
At least he's not calling for tax cuts.
That's it for tonight. Stop talking, Ed. We'll be back at 7 on Monday. Up next, it's SJ with the UK Tonight.